name is Matthew, and I am the program manager here at Stewart Observatory for the Active Galactic Videos project. And today we are going to be talking about our most recent video, which was about the CTA, or the Cherenkov Telescope Array. And I'd like to introduce the two students, the two people who created the video. So I will start with Victoria. Why don't you introduce yourself? And then we'll go over to Michael.
Sounds good. My name is Victoria. If you've seen these live streams before, you've probably seen me. I'm an AGV videographer, and I helped shoot and edit this video.
Excellent. And Michael, go ahead and introduce yourself.
And I'm Michael. I'm an astronomy student here at the U of A, and I helped with the planning of this video and the script, and I'm in it. So, yeah.
Excellent. All right. So the purpose of these live sessions is to talk about the kind of the behind-the-scenes making of all of our videos, and the primary purpose is to talk about science communication, and we want to participate in the community of science communicators online and on YouTube, and we want to encourage people who have an interest in science communication, who are making science videos or involved in the enterprise in any way, to join us. And this is not just for us to answer questions, but also for us to start a conversation about a variety of topics. Now, again, our expertise is in creating videos, so that's going to be what we're focusing on. Also, if you have questions, we are monitoring the live stream, the chat in the live stream. So please feel free to ask questions at any time in the chat. So we'll go ahead and just get started. So can both of you talk a little bit about the genesis of this video? It had kind of an interesting background, and it's related to another one of our videos.
Yeah, so all of this goes back to a Veritas video we made a few months ago. So one of the former members of our team, Aiden, had heard about Veritas, and he thought that the telescopes there just looked amazing and really
and
cool.
And Veritas, it stands for?
The Very Energetic something
Telescope
array.
Telescope array. Yeah, we should look it
up. 2 seconds.
I knew it when we were making the video, but it's an observatory looking at gamma rays, and that's really unusual because gamma rays don't actually make it through the Earth's atmosphere. You can't really observe them unless you have a space-based telescope. And so the scientists, one of them in Arizona, over the last 40 years have worked on ways to view these gamma rays from the Earth's surface. And how they do this is that when the gamma ray hits the Earth's atmosphere, it causes something called Cherenkov radiation, because when the light is going at the speed of light in space, the speed of light in space and the speed of light in the Earth's atmosphere are slightly different. And so for a brief moment, when the light hits the Earth's atmosphere, it is going faster than the speed of light in the atmosphere, because it was just in space. And this causes what's called Cherenkov radiation. It's also the blue light that you can see in a nuclear reactor. And so you can observe this with just a simple telescope on the ground. And so Veritas is made up of 4, 12-meter dishes that are viewing this radiation and trying to pinpoint gamma ray sources in the universe. And they're basically just these big light buckets, but they look incredible. And that's how Aiden first found out about them, and he wanted to make a video, but he was graduating. And so he gave us all the information and a lot of background, and then just left it over for myself and Emily, another member of our team, to work on. And we did a bit more research. We got in contact with Dr. Michael Daniel down at Veritas, who was a big help. He's in the original Veritas video. He was very helpful and interesting, and interested in the video as a whole, and just amazing help with the video. And we ended up going down and filming. But while we had just heard of the four telescopes that make up Veritas, when we were there, they were actually in the middle of building a new telescope. This was back in November, I want to say, of last year. And there was this new telescope called the Schwarzschild-Couder prototype telescope, or the prototype Schwarzschild-Couder telescope. And they told us that it was going to be done in a few months, and they were going to be having a first light ceremony. And the scientist who was there observing on Veritas that night, Rene Ong, right? That was his. He was one of the spokespeople for the Cherenkov Telescope Array, which is the array that this brand new Schwarzschild-Couder telescope was going to be put in. And so he told us a lot more about the new telescope, and then they invited us back in January for the first light ceremony. So we were really excited and thought about making a second video all about this new thing. But then when we emailed in January to say, hey, are we still good to go? They said that we were, but that the schedule had changed and there were maybe a few issues because of the government shutdown that happened. The schedule had to change because Veritas is a federally administered site. And so for a while, we weren't really sure if everything was going to go well, what the plan was, what had really happened. But and so we ended up going down and we weren't really sure what we were going to get.
Our plan was kind of, I had my setup of like a DSLR camera and a shotgun microphone, so like pretty compact, and I was like, Michael wanted to record some lines that we were gonna use for the intro and like a couple pieces throughout the video, and after that we were just like, let's see if we can make a video out of everything else we can get. So
this was relatively quick turnaround, right? Yeah. So if it was filmed in January, so when was it filmed? Like
when did they open?
Mid-January. It was like January 17th, 18th.
Okay,
something
so
like
filmed mid-January, and we actually released it March.
Yeah, and I think I had it finished in like February. I'm pretty sure. I think we just pushed it because we had other videos that were like ready to go, and like Women of Discovery and stuff like we were trying to space it out correctly.
Right.
But yeah.
So this is one of those videos that kind of all came together like quickly and smoothly, even though it seemed like we didn't know what was going on at the time, right?
The day we were filming, we still were pretty much completely unsure how this video was going to turn out. We had a few lines we wanted to say. We'd already recorded an interview the first time we were at Veritas, but other than that, it was just see what we can get and see what kind of a video we can make. And so the time we spent planning was very short compared to, say, the first Veritas video, where a lot of research had been done a few months before. We'd been in contact for a while. We'd planned out a lot of the things we'd wanted to say. We got a bunch of interview questions for Michael when we were down there. We'd planned a lot of things out, and it was a lot more structured what we thought we wanted, whereas this video, it was, we're going to show up, we're going to get a lot of cool footage, and hopefully make it into a good video. So it was completely different, the two videos, even though they were about relatively similar things.
Mm-hmm. Also, Veritas stands for the Very Energetic Radiation Imaging Telescope Array System. Also, Veritas, the word, means truth.
Yeah.
How intriguing.
And
very clever.
So that I think that's really interesting. How in some ways it was nice that this had a deadline, right? Like we had to film on this day at this time because this was when the ceremony was. This is when the event was happening.
Yeah.
And so. Talk about a little bit about the day of the event. So you drove out there and you met with people, and I mean you didn't have interviews scheduled. You didn't have you didn't know who was going to be speaking and when. So talk a little bit about what that schedule kind of looked like and how you got people to talk on camera.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was kind of a schedule, but like Michael was saying, it was kind of all thrown to the wind when the government shut down, and they were like, we can't even actually see First Light.
It turned out...
and so not only is the site federally funded, but also some of the scientists who would have been traveling to the First Light ceremony were federally funded, and so that means that they don't have access to the funds to travel necessarily.
It ended up not affecting us nearly as much as we thought. They still, their backup plan, what they ended up putting together, still ended up going really smoothly and really well, but we didn't know that it was going to work like that because we were just told, hey, the schedule's different than the one that we'd sent you before. And so we showed up a little bit before all of the scientists did and all of the people there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was a beautiful day. Everything was perfect. And we were able to film everything we wanted from us before anyone even showed up. And so we got this done very quickly. Sometimes shoots can go hours and hours trying to get all the footage you want. But within the first hour of being there, we had all of the footage of us that we wanted. And then it was just
I was able to get a lot of B-roll too before people were at the site, which is always nice.
Yeah, and then we were just walking around with the camera really to see what other cool things would happen. And they moved the telescope when we got that, and the person whose idea this entire thing was, he was there giving a speech, and we were able to get the speech on camera, and it was... the speech was incredible.
That was like a real run and gun moment, because like I've done some, not really for AGV, but I've done some live event like videography before and everything throughout like college and high school and stuff, but it's always like very nerve-wracking because you're like, I need to be everywhere all the time this whole event.
Right. Well, and you
'Cause I
get
could
one
miss
shot.
Exactly.
And you get one chance.
It's like documentary filmmaking. It's very stressful.
Right.
But, you know, they're like gathering to do the speech, and I'm like all the way in the back of this, like, there had to be what, like 100 and something people there, I think. Like 100 and something scientists and everyone that was out there, and I was like, I can't see any. So I have the DSLR and I'm like holding it up and I'm like, this is the worst shot. So I just like snuck in between everybody and like got on the ground right at the ropes of the telescope and was like, this is great. We're gonna just chill here for a little bit. And I was able to get a lot of the speech, and actually worked out.
Kind of like being a wedding photographer. You just kind of have to be in front of people.
Exactly.
Like, you just kind of have to be like, I'm sorry, this is
go
my job.
sorry.
This is my job. I got to do this.
Well, it's like at one
Excuse
point,
me.
Michael was being like, I'm sorry, I just saw myself in the camera. I'm so strange. But Michael was saying like, why are you filming random people and stuff? And I'm like, because you need you gotta see what's going on. You gotta see all these people like interacting and stuff. This is real. This is the thing. He's like, you're being really creepy about it. I mean,
Yeah, well.
it's my job.
Yeah, and so we actually weren't the only film crew that was there. We were here to make this YouTube video, but there was a news crew there to film the event, and they were doing just sort of similar things to we were. They were pulling people over for interviews and filming the entire event just for the local news. But then at one point they were moving the telescope, and all of these scientists were completely silent watching the telescope move, and it was this really cool moment. And suddenly we hear the news person off on the side saying, oh, we're here, they're moving the telescope, and he was the only one talking when all the scientists were sort of like just stunned looking up at this telescope but just so happy to see this. The news person was just being, I don't want to say annoying, but he was being very loud off on the side, and it was just really funny.
So funny. I have it on
But again,
camera.
that's part of their
it's
job
just like,
too.
Everyone's silent, and you have this beautiful image of the telescope, and in the background you hear, and we're here at the Cherenkov telescope.
I mean, it was great that people thought it was worth showing on the news, that they thought this was important enough. It was just a really funny moment when he started talking right there. So
we also very briefly got on the news in like a
we
wide
were in
shot.
the background.
We were trying so hard to not get in any of their shots because we were like, we don't want to be on the news today.
Because we don't matter at all. It was the scientists and the telescope thing.
Like, we can't be in the... And Michael found us in like one shot, like in the back corner.
Nice. So we have some questions from people who watched the video, who left questions in the comments. So one of the questions is why this is a science question as opposed to a making of the video question. But why are the telescopes out in the open and not covered in a dome?
Yeah, so it's important to look at why telescopes are in a dome in the first place, and it's to protect the mirrors, because they're taking images of these very far off things, and it has to be perfectly calibrated, everything has to be perfect, and you can actually ruin the coating on the mirrors with things just like humidity can ruin it. But the gamma ray observatories are basically just these huge light buckets. I mean, the first one was a trash can. They wouldn't put a mirror in a trash can. It was literally a light bucket that they were collecting the light in. And so they don't need to be nearly as perfectly aligned or as perfectly mirrored and everything exactly. They still have to be very well made, but it's not quite as important that they're like that. It's similar to why radio telescopes don't need to be in domes. It's just because any small issue with a radio telescope dish doesn't actually impact the science very much.
Right, because you're not trying to create an image with one of these gamma ray telescopes. So the mirror, if it's not perfect, it's not such a big deal. You're basically just collecting photons, and their exact orientation doesn't matter for the final result.
And they're only looking at the atmosphere. This is light that hits the Earth's atmosphere, and that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at stars billions of light years away or millions of light years away. They're just looking at things that hit the Earth's atmosphere. Now they can use those to go back and see where some of these sources are, which could be in the Milky Way or in other galaxies, but the things they're actually looking at is just the light when it hits the atmosphere.
Excellent. So another question that somebody asked on in the comments was, can you talk a little bit about the microphone setup that was used for the outdoor shots? Because that's always a challenge when you're filming outside.
Yeah, so our, like I mentioned it before, but our basic setup was, we use a DSLR, I'm looking at it right now.
Canon.
It's 80D, an EOS 80D. It's great. And I usually, for setups, we have a small Tascam, and that's an audio recorder device, and it attaches to the bottom of the camera, which is really nice. And then you can put that whole thing onto the tripod. Well, we didn't want to bring a tripod because we knew we would just be moving, and I have a relatively steady hand. I don't know, you can judge, you watch the video. We, just to make it easier, we just have a small wire that wires from the Tascam up to a microphone that goes on the top of the camera, because there's a little shoe on the top of the camera. And it's just a shotgun.
It's like a Rode.
I think it's a Rode mic shotgun. So a directional mic, it's like one of the ones you would see if you're not familiar with mics, like in like a spoof thing where like the guy has like the boom pole, like the mic that's on there, it's like a little skinny stick. And yeah, I mean, it was a little windy, but like honestly not really. Like it was I was worried it was going to be windy because like we just have that luck where it's just windy all the time whenever we want to film outside.
Mm-hmm.
Wait for the VLA video. But but luckily it was really nice weather and everything, and like we have this thing called we call it a dead cat as a joke. It's not a dead cat, but it's like a windsock essentially, and it's like this gray like fuzzy thing, and it's really weird, but you like put it on the mic and it essentially like kills a lot of the wind noise, unless you have like big gusting like 30-mile-an-hour winds. Isn't that gonna work? But like yeah, we use that, and we got really good sound out of it. There's a couple shots where like when we were talking to Michael Daniel, where you can hear people in the background and stuff, and like there's only so much you can do about that sort of thing. Like I'm not gonna ask like some of the world's top scientists to like shut up for a shot, like that's fine. But yeah, it
So was that
well.
Did you use that for the entire video, or did you lav mic people during interviews? Did you when you were talking with Michael? Did you have a lav mic on him at all, or was that entirely shotgun?
It was entirely shotgun. We thought about doing a lav mic, but just because our interview with Michael Daniel was maybe 4 or 5 minutes, the one like in front of the telescope,
If that.
and like we didn't want to bother with everything because he was like he was running the show,
Right.
We didn't want to like trouble him with it, and when we were shooting your stuff, the sound was fine. We didn't need it. And Renee, I wasn't there for the Renee Ong shoot, so I don't know what you guys used for that, but that sounded pretty good too.
Yeah. Some of the real issues other than wind were there was I don't know what it's called. There was some construction thing where you can lift someone up into the air.
Oh my god!
That they
the
kept
cherry
moving.
picker.
Yeah, that they kept moving. That would cause this loud beeping, and
It's really fun.
in the video, I pronounced Couder wrong, and we didn't refilm it because we found out almost immediately afterwards that I'd pronounced that wrong. They told us that you could pronounce it either way, but I pronounced it wrong.
I think he was just being nice.
Yeah. But we didn't refilm it because that was going on, and we didn't really want to walk up and try and re-get the stuff and wait and get it between the beeps or anything like that, and so we didn't refilm it, so I apologize, that's wrong. But that was a bigger issue than the wind. And then the other issue was just during the speech, it was just because getting down on the gravel trying to get the shot was a little...
Yeah, it's really hard to just like crouch on the ground with a camera in a very awkward position and not like make gravel noises as you try to like not fall over with your feet. And he was walking around and stuff too, but really, I don't know, the sound ended up just being like good. Also, the benefit of like we were at a telescope far away in like a mountain range, there's no traffic noises.
It's amazing.
Which is amazing.
It's the nicest. When we first got there to film the Veritas video and got out of the car, it was as dead silent as I've ever heard anywhere outside.
It was
yeah.
I remember we got out of the car and I was like, this is gonna be great for sound.
Yeah.
And so this telescope it's at the same observatory. So it's at Whipple Observatory.
Yeah.
Is that right, on Mount?
I don't know.
Is that Hopkins?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's at the base of Mount Hopkins?
It's at the base of Mount
Because
Hopkins.
we could
Okay.
see what's the...
Is it MMT?
Is it MMT on Hopkins?
Yeah.
Because we could see the telescope that's on the mountain.
Okay. Yeah.
when
So
we
it's
were at
just
Veritas.
a little bit south and east of Tucson.
Yeah.
about
And
40
so
minutes
yeah,
out.
it's about a 40-minute drive.
Convenient.
So it's not too bad. So like if we're going to the Large Binocular Telescope on Mount Graham, like that's a several hour drive
Yeah.
east and south.
I mean, even Mount Lemmon is like, once you get up there, because there's a couple telescopes on Mount Lemmon, that's what, like an hour and a half, hour 45.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a bad drive, and it can still be relatively close to Tucson, and still, we still have research observatories that are functional professional observatories, even though Tucson's light pollution is getting worse.
Yeah, but we have a question. How long is too long to make a science video? Do you try to keep them under a certain amount of minutes? So for that, it really depends on the video. If we think that there's enough interesting information for a 6-7 minute video, we've made them before and they can be really interesting. But usually when I try and make a video, I try and keep it under 4 or 5 minutes. But if there's enough interesting information to keep people engaged, then it can go on for 6-7 minutes. And we've even broken videos into multiple videos because we thought there was enough good stuff there that people would find interesting.
Yeah, I remember one specific example of like when we were trying to figure out timing and stuff. Is more like a logistics affected thing, but when we were doing the light year walk video, link will be in the description down below. It was this cool video that we did that took like 4 takes because it was a difficult video to do, but essentially Michael walks from the Earth to Venus, right? And like at like a comparable speed, if like the Earth was this size and Venus was this size, then like this is how fast he would be walking and it would be the speed of light, sort of thing. It's a bad explanation, but you get it. Our original thought was like, oh, let's go from like Earth to the sun, because like the sun is like the big deal in the solar system.
Right.
And we can like walk there and it'll be great and it'll take 8 minutes. And we're like, we can find something to talk about for 8 minutes. Sure, okay. And then we were like, oh, wait, we need a camera person to walk and like be still for 8 minutes. And we need Michael to not mess up at all with his lines, which you're very good at it. But 8 minutes is a long time
It's a long
to get
script.
everything right. And we were like, that's probably not logistically a good idea.
And then I think the other thing is that, I mean, we sort of know that 5-minute videos are the kind of an optimal length for videos like ours on the internet, on YouTube. Like they get watched the most. People are more likely to click on them. People are more likely to watch them all the way through. And so, I mean, we aim for 5 minutes, or 3 to 5 minutes is kind of our goal. But we are not afraid of letting them run a little long if we have the content to support it. And so we really we don't hold ourselves to that, but that is definitely our target.
Yeah, I think it helps too that like having sort of like we aim for 5 minutes. We don't get super deep into the details, like scientific details of anything, like to the point where we might bore some of our viewers, but also like we still want to be an approachable channel for people who like people who are really into astronomy and know a lot about astronomy, but also people who are like new and are like, I want to like.
This sounds like a cool topic.
I've never like seen a telescope. I want to learn about this one, and so we like. It's a good balance, I think, to still be approachable and like not get into the nitty gritty, too much.
So there are 2 more questions that are kind of related. So 10,000 subscribers without a video asks, when it comes to editing, what is the hardest part or most time-consuming part? And then LPJRZ asks, says that the speech made a great impact during the video. How did you decide where to put that? Like, so when you're editing a video, like, what is the hardest part or most time-consuming part, and how do you decide where to put things?
Well, editing's a process, man. So my like editing process and like time consumption, a lot of it. No, I mean, like, so I don't know what specifically takes the longest. I mean, if you're talking about, like, picture edit versus, like, sound and color, then picture edit's going to take the longest, of course.
So walk a little bit through your process of editing this video. So you import the video off the camera.
So essentially what I do is I start off with, like, pulling in everything that we shot and putting it into a timeline in Premiere, which basically means that I'm just going to run through the whole thing and watch it and cut out the parts that, you know, it was like we were, like, moving shots or something and I happened to get it on camera, or, like, you know, the audio isn't usable or something, you know, just the things that I don't think are going to make it into the final cut, and try to cut down, like, you know, 45 minutes, an hour of film down to, like, maybe 10 minutes. And then I go through there and I think, like, okay, what are the most interesting parts and what are the parts that are necessary to tell the, not only the story, but also the, like, science behind it. So, like, with CTA, I wanted to make sure that, like, we had explanations of, like, what this telescope does, because it is very different from, like, other telescopes, and that's the whole point of the video, and, like, talking about the project itself and some of the other aspects of it, like how big it is, like it's spread across like a bunch of different continents. Is that correct? It's down.
Yeah, there's the CTA.
It's spread across.
Yeah, there are two sites, one in the northern
hemisphere. Okay, just want to make sure. And you know, just finding those things that, like, are necessary to tell the story, and then cutting out some of the stuff that's just kind of like, it's cool and it could be interesting to put in, but there's no room for it. And that
it just stops the flow of the video too, right? Yeah. I mean, there's.
Unfortunately, that was the entire speech. We only included a clip of it, but the speech as a whole was amazing. And it would have been great just to be able to include the entire thing, but we couldn't. So that's something else. Like, you know, after you, like, narrow everything down, you kind of have to find placement and stuff. And I ended up putting the speech where I did, kind of because I wanted to, because it's what is it, like, maybe 3/4 through the video, I think I put it in. It just, like, I thought it would be a good way to kind of wrap up what people have been saying, not as, like, a finale, because originally I had it as, like, a finale piece, right? Like, that was going to be the last thing we heard from anyone in the video, and then we would cut to that end shot and credits. But I thought, like, you know, maybe we can talk a little bit more about, like, the future of this telescope and stuff, because, like, that was kind of the culmination of the event that we were at, and I thought that would be a really nice way to end it, and that section, at least. Because, like that's what we were there for, you know. He was announcing that the telescope is going to start moving and, like, talking about the whole project, and it also seems like you don't want to put that in too early because the viewer needs some context, right? Exactly. So, you know, they don't know what CTA is, they don't know why we're there. You can't start off you know, you can't start off with that necessarily. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could, and people be like, "Oh, that's interesting. What's that?" But I think it has more impact when you kind of understand what the video is about and what the telescope is, and kind of like its role, and then you're interested and invested in it, and then you get to the speech. Yeah, I think it's kind of like at least the way I edit too. Sometimes I've noticed I have a sort of subconscious, like, following the traditional story arc sort of thing. So, like, you know, back in, like, elementary school, middle school, we were taught, like, there is a story arc and it looks like a line going up and then a partial line going down, right? So it's like a little triangle, but it doesn't actually make a full triangle. And it's essentially like, you know, inciting action and then, like, rising action, you get to the climax, and it's like, but there's still more that's going to happen after it. And so, like, I feel like that was, like, the big point of the video is this speech. So it was 3/4 of the way in, and then, like, some, like, and this too, you know, at the end. Yeah, I don't know. Everyone's editing styles are different. Every project is different. I approach all the different kind of videos that we do with, like, a little bit of a different, like, approach when I go to edit. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question. Well, yeah. So what was the hardest part? So you said the most time-consuming part is just going from the 45 minutes of footage down to a 10-minute like selects reel. Is that what you would call it? Yeah, I do the selects reel first, and then I do a rough cut, and then, like, once we polish that a little bit, I'll change the name to a fine cut. And that's usually close to what gets published. But yeah, I mean, just I think the hardest part is usually finding where things fit, because I moved a lot of stuff around in this one. And
yeah, I mean, it ended up working, but sometimes you just have to, like, keep moving stuff or, like, keep going back to your selects rail and being like, I deleted this, but maybe I need it. And trying to figure out where things work, and unfortunately cutting some really good stuff. Like,
well, I think that's part of, so I would say two things. So one, I think maybe not all films are like this, but certainly the kinds of videos that we make, I think you have to have kind of a journalist's eye or a journalistic mindset to these things, right? It's not, in addition to being a storyteller, you have to figure out the who, what, when, where, why. And so I think that your background in journalism often comes in really handy for when you're doing that, because there are parts where in previous videos where we've forgotten to explain something, and so remembering that we have to make sure that people introduce themselves, and that they that when somebody uses an acronym that we have, it's good to have them explain what that acronym means and things like that. Mm-hmm. So having that kind of a mindset is useful, but then also just experience and artistry, like developing a feel for this has kind of been going on for a while, so we need to switch the shot, or we need to move on to the next thing to keep the pacing going. Mm-hmm. Or this has been kind of long, but it's interesting, so we can let it go a little longer than than one might think.
Average, yeah.
And so I think that and that comes from building up your experience level and making videos, and frankly making videos that don't hit the mark, and I mean I could have let that go for a little longer, or that went really long, we should have cut that shorter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the journalism thing and the artist's eye thing as well, but also the benefit that our videographers on our team have is we're all from the University of Arizona Film and Television School. Hey, shout out. And we, as part of our program, we learned a lot about documentary making, and we got to make documentaries, short documentaries in one of our classes. It's kind of just a requirement of the program. So being thrown into that is really interesting, because obviously you're gonna make a fiction film a lot differently than a doc film, and these are kind of mini documentaries,
right?
So it's yeah, it's good to have that background. And
that's been really helpful. And so the fact that the students in our film program are required. I mean, that's a requirement for for your junior film, or which year?
we make a couple films through our program, but in junior year we make a short documentary. We also have a history of documentary class, and there's a couple other for people who are more interested in learning specific parts of documentary history and stuff, and making documentaries. So
cool.
Yeah.
And then Michael, just to wrap up, can you talk a little bit about any of the astronomy background that you feel was helpful for you for understanding this and being able to ask interesting and useful questions and to explain this? What part of this telescope was interesting to you, and what part of your background do you think helped you be able to do a better job?
I mean, really, I never learned anything about this, which was why it was so interesting, was that gamma ray astronomy, maybe you briefly talk about it in an intro astronomy class where it's, and then here's radio astronomy, here's visible astronomy, here's gamma ray astronomy, but we've never gone in any detail with that, because at the U of A, none of the professors are heavily involved in this. That was one of the interesting things we found out at Veritas, is that the U of A, I think they said, rented them some offices, but was in no way really involved with Veritas, and so I hadn't heard any of this, and so it was I was learning all of this new, and I'd learned about other types of astronomy in different wavelengths of light, and so that helped me sort of understand more of what they were doing. But this is still completely different than any other thing. You're not, as we mentioned earlier, you're not taking a picture of some far off thing. You're collecting photons, you're collecting light to try and pinpoint sources, and so it was so completely different that it was just interesting. I was really interested in doing more research and following through, and so the fact that I didn't really, in some of our videos, the astronomy students know a lot about the topic beforehand and use that to make the video, video, but I genuinely knew very little about this, and so it was really easy to ask questions because I didn't know anything. I wanted to keep asking questions. I didn't need to think about, okay, what are questions that a non-astronomy person might find interesting about this? It was, what questions would I find interesting about this? Because I didn't really know anything about gamma ray astronomy. And even in my research, I wasn't able to learn as much as I'd hoped. And so during the interview with Michael for the Veritas video, and during their interview with Renee about this new telescope we never even knew existed when we were doing our first research, I was just curious about what everything was, and so made sure to ask any questions that I had, and hopefully that made an interesting video.
Cool. We do actually have another question from LPJRZ, who asks, before a video is published, how many of the members of the team review it?
Oh, well, so our process is usually like me or like one of the the videographers. We as videographers, we make like a rough cut or some sort of like a cut that we're happy with, and we show it to the team. Usually we'll like share it with each other through like our little private Facebook page, and I don't know, what do you guys like?
I mean, I would say so the first cut is always just done by the editor, whoever's editing that particular video. And then depending on how much difficulty they're having, sometimes they'll run it by me, and I'll have some initial suggestions for like broad cuts or additions. Like, we need to explain this a little bit more, or this doesn't quite work. But then we always, before we release a video, we always run it by the entire team for suggestions. I mean, that's pretty standard. I mean, there have been videos that not everybody watches before we release it, but we try to get as many eyes on it as we can.
Yeah, we've got about 12 people in our team.
Yeah, now it's more like 10, yeah. 10.
But like, I mean, unless people are busy on occasion, but even then we'll usually have like at least like 8 sets of eyes on it. With suggestions and things, and like it's nice too because you get all the different perspectives. So it's like, oh, this astronomy thing was wrong, or like, oh, they kind of said this weird, maybe you could like try to record that again, or even just like, oh, that cut was strange, like, so
And then the first cut is always at least seen by the other people who work on the video. Like when Vicky had finished her first CTA cut, I'm not sure if anyone else on the team even saw it, but she called me in and we sat down and just watched it because we were the ones that were making the video, and so we wanted to make sure that it did what we wanted. And then eventually everyone did see it when we showed it to them to make sure everything was good and flowed and worked well. But at least that first cut, even if it's not seen by everyone, the people who all worked on the video usually always see it and make suggestions before everyone sees it, although usually it's just posted to Facebook, so everyone does have the ability to see it and review it.
Yeah, and then sometimes we will have the person who's the subject of the video review it, just in case we got anything incorrect.
It's mainly what we've been doing for like Women of Discovery, particularly just because like there are so many little details in these women's lives that like we just want to make sure like we did get the right year that you graduated, and we did get the right like program that you worked with and stuff like that. So
so I mean a minimum of 2 people review all of our videos. It's always whoever's editing and then myself before we release them, but oftentimes it's more than that. It's more like 4 or 5 or 6 or as many as 10 people. Mm-hmm. But the process is never that those people stall it and make and make it difficult to get it published. It's always just a process of minor edits and iterating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we are over our time a little bit. Thank you so much to those of you who joined us today, and especially thank you to those of you who asked questions in our live session. We really appreciate it. And we will be back again in 2 weeks. We have another video that will be coming out on next Tuesday, and that's our next Women of Discovery video. And
not this
that's
Tuesday.
Not next Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
After.
I'm sorry. So the next video is Special Collections.
Oh no.
Special Collections is the next video, but
Special Collections is going to be 2 weeks from now. Yeah.
Next week there's
something.
That's right. I forgot we are at the end of March.
Yeah.
All right. So for those of you who are subscribed, keep your eyes open for a special video that's coming out, and then 2 weeks from now, we will be releasing our trip through the special collections where we got to see some really amazing old astronomy original manuscripts.
If you're a nerd for like astronomy history or like book history or like kind of any history ever, like it's so good.
It's a really good video, and it was shot by Aaron, who is one of our most accomplished documentary filmmakers, and he's just very good at it. And so make sure you join us for that, and then after that we will have another live session. So we will see you again live in 3 weeks, and thanks again for joining us. Take care. Have a great afternoon. Have a great afternoon.